My name is Jason J. Rock Houston, and you're listening to Chaotic Risk Magazine. We can be found on the web at www.chaoticrisk.com. And our special guest tonight, once again, is Joe Lawson, the lead singer from Dragonlore. Welcome to the show once again, Joe. And we're interviewing you again for our On the Record segment, which is where we talk to musicians who discuss some of their influences and their favorite albums by some of their all-time favorite bands. And today you wanted to discuss, which is kind of an underrated album in my eyes, W.A.S.P. Classic 1989 album, The Headless Children, which was released on April 15th, 1989. It's the fourth studio album by W.A.S.P. Now, if you don't mind, let's start the interview off sharing with us how you first became a W.A.S.P. fan, or how this album in particular came on your radar.
Actually, I heard the remake that they did of the Real Me.
Oh wow!
The song originally by the Who, and I didn't at the time I didn't realize. I didn't even know that the Who did it. To be honest with you,
yeah.
I thought it was a W.A.S.P. original song. I really did. And then when I heard the Who, and I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. That's kind of my my story with this album and that, because I was a huge Q fan, but when this album came out in 1989, I wasn't a diehard Who fan, and like a lot of people, I'd heard all the Radioheads, like Pinball Wizard, Who Are You,
Sure.
Won't Get Fooled Again, and so I think that's part of the reason maybe Blackie decided to go with the Real Me. Well, who doesn't know the Who, but it wasn't one of their all-time greatest hits, so a lot of people have never heard that song. And I think a lot of people like us, Joe, got turned on to that song initially through W.A.S.P. and kind of found out later that it was indeed a Who song.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember the exact story. I've seen an old interview years ago with Blackie, and he explained it was somebody that actually told them or suggested to them that he should do this. That is perfect for his voice, and they were right. I mean, he just blew it out of the ballpark. But someone recommended to them to do that song. And
I'm sure a big reason he did it, besides being a huge Who fan, is I know that one of his all-time favorite bass players was John Entwistle.
True, yeah. So, I mean, it was a perfect fit in multiple ways for him.
Yeah, and interesting, Joe, I'm going to give you a little bit of trivia here. You may have not known, but I did not know myself until just today in doing research for this. That was actually one of two covers on the album. The other cover, believe it or not, was Locomotive Man. And any idea who originally did the song?
That I'm not sure of at all either.
Okay, this is gonna trip you out, I think. Jethro Tull, if you can believe that, of all artists for W.A.S.P. to cover.
Really?
And,
no kidding.
And I'll tell you, maybe later when you get a chance, go on YouTube and type in Locomotive Breath, and you'll find, of course, the original Jethro Tull version, which oddly enough sounds nothing like the W.A.S.P. version. I mean, if you listen to two different versions of a song, Blackie really metalized it. He really rocked it up, I will say, and it sounds nothing like the original tune. But interestingly enough, so if you listen to the two songs, they sound like two completely different songs, but Blackie did a great job of really making it his own.
Yeah, that whole album, I fell in love with that whole record mainly because of his voice. I mean, he put so much passion into this record. You can't deny it. I mean, it's just every lyric, every line that he sings is just right from the gut, man, right from the heart. And it's a great album, and the ballad on there, Forever Free, is probably my favorite ballad of all time. As far as softer songs go, I mean, what an amazing and beautiful song.
See, that was an interesting thing for W.A.S.P. to even record a ballad back then. I mean, I think
chance kind of that they took.
I think that had been maybe the very first time they'd done a ballad, and back in the day, people were kind of at first, when they released it as a single, kind of like, they're W.A.S.P. in a ballad, but it became one of those songs. It became actually a big hit for the band at the time, and became one of those things that you just could not, as much as you may wanted to be against it, because hey, they're supposed to be a headbanging band. It was just such a great song, you could not deny it.
Right, absolutely, and to this day, if nobody's ever heard of it, do yourself a huge favor and check out Forever Free W.A.S.P, the Headless Children album. Amazing song. The whole album really is. This is great.
Like you said, I think the two main singles off that album were First The Real Me and then Forever Free. And again, Forever Free was a very different type of song for W.A.S.P at that time. And W.A.S.P had been featured like on Headbangers Ball and MTV, the previous couple albums, but they'd only get played like on Headbangers Ball. And Forever Free became such a big hit that it was being played like it was hitting the top 40. I think it was on all the countdown shows. It was even I think on Casey Kasem's top 10 video show he used to have, America's Top 10 or something like that. It was awesome. And it was all over MTV. And it wasn't just being played on Headbangers Ball. And people forget back in the day. 1989. MTV was still heavily playing music videos, and at that time, a lot of these hard rock bands were kind of being heavily featured.
Right, yeah. Those were the days for sure. For sure.
I mean, music television.
Mean Man, that's another one a song that I really liked off that record.
Yeah, I love.
It's got a lot of attitude. It just spits fire. It's a great tune.
And a lot of people consider this like really the last real official W.A.S.P album, because after this album, the next thing they did was a Crimson Idol and Still Not Black Enough, and it almost became it's turned into which always kind of has been W.A.S.P always kind of been Blackie Lawless's band, but it's kind of interesting. If you go all the way back to the first album, okay, they have the whole band on the cover of the album, but then by the last the second album, The Last Command, it's almost like Blackie Lawless is W.A.S.P. He's the sole member of the band, on the front cover. It's kind of interesting,
Right, yeah. I don't know the inner workings and whatnot, but just what an amazing album and what a great band, and like you said, she's underrated in my opinion. Maybe it wasn't at the time that it came out, but
interesting
I think people forget what a great record actually that was, and some of the other records are awesome too. Unfortunately, I never got to see them live during that time frame. I would have loved to. I really wish I would have got to see them on that album.
Yeah, because I think of all the albums they've ever put out, this remains like their most critically acclaimed album as far as the critics liking it. I mean, a lot of people have gone on record saying they point to the Headless Children as their favorite W.A.S.P album, not just because it had like Forever Free, but because the songwriting was really stepped up, and they really stepped it a notch, especially Blackie being the principal songwriter.
They really matured as songwriters and as a band. They did.
Because see, and I think that's why kind of the band itself kind of fell apart, and Blackie kind of took over. Because if you look at the songwriting on this album, like on those first three W.A.S.P albums, it was really more of a kind of a hard rock metal band. And even if you go, there was huge controversy around the band's live shows. They used to have this thing where they'd throw raw meat out into the to the crowd and stuff like that, and just the theatrics of a live show, and then they come to this album, and there was initially a backlash from a lot of the hardcore fans because, like if you listen to the lyrics, this is much less of kind of a rock album, more of a concept album, if you will. It dealt more with political issues and stuff, as opposed to like I Want to Be Somebody.
Right. Yeah, like I said, they matured, and that showed in their lyrics and their songwriting, and they wanted to do something from the heart, something really deep, and in my opinion, they accomplished it. They hit it out of the ballpark. Mission accomplished.
Oh yeah, and people have this little thing. They go between this album and the Crimson Idol, because the Crimson Idol was kind of a follow up to this, and that was like really his attempt at doing a rock opera, much more of a concept type of thing, very much like the Headless Children, but it was more of a rock opera type of thing. And a lot of people say, "I love the Headless Children." No, it's the Crimson Idol. So they go between those two albums.
Right. Yeah, that's a good album too. But for me, there's just something really special about the Headless Children album.
And see, probably because that's where you kind of became a W.A.S.P band. That's kind of album you first discovered the band. Like you said, they've been around before, but they weren't.
I've heard of W.A.S.P before. I heard of Headless Children.
Yeah.
I was introduced to Live in the Raw.
Yeah.
I mean, You know, you couldn't have been a rock or a metal fan and not heard of that. You know, back in the day, and I loved all those songs. I Want to Be Somebody and all that. You know, it was awesome. You know, and then when I heard this, I was just like, oh, this is like a whole new level for him.
And then I don't know if you ever heard the song F Like a Beast Animal or something.
Right.
For years, you know, they left that off of the debut album. They were able to release it on like a bonus track on later editions, but it was kind of, just because that word was in the album, you know, in the title. And then I remember back then, you know, the PMRC was also really, really big, and they were trying to ban a lot of these albums, and they were like targeting groups, especially like W.A.S.P was one of the main groups they were targeting. Twisted Sister, you know, so much that D. Snyder went and did his thing before the Congress and that, his testimony, but they were targeting Blackie Lawless, and he just continued to do his thing, you know.
Oh yeah. That just helped. All that did is help those bands.
Yeah.
Bring them more exposure and bring the rebelliousness, the rebellion side out of the rock and metal fans. You know, and you know, actually, they should thank the PMRC because they probably sold more records because of them.
It's so true. That's what I was getting ready to say, because it's like anything you tell a kid, you can't have that. That's exactly what they're going to go out and get. They're going to find a way to get it.
Exactly. You know, and I seen an interview with Dave Mustaine years ago where he said they asked him how he felt about parents' rights groups and PMRC, people like that, burning his albums. He said his reply was, "They got to buy them to burn them, right?" Yeah,
and you know, it's kind of funny all these years later, because like. You know, at the time, these congressional hearings were going on about the PMRC and stickering these albums and trying to censor some of these bands and that. And then, like, years later, you know, they're talking about, like, Blackie Lawless and, you know, D. Snyder. What kind of influence are they on the youth of America? They're talking about family values. And years later, you know, Tipper Gore and Al Gore, their marriage falls apart because of his family values and cheating on his wife. And it's kind of like, hypocrite, look in the face, you know, look in the mirror.
Not calling the kettle black.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny, too, because guys like D. Snyder, they were like, you listen to that song like, We're Not Going to Take It, and they were really one of those bands, the anti-establishment, and all these years later, he's kind of like become the establishment, like, you know, so much that, you know, Donald Trump was using, you know, when he ran for president last time, he was using Twisted Sister song. He's like, you know, Donald, I really don't want you using my music, you know, and I guess they're good friends, and so he just kind of he went along with that. But it's kind of funny that, you know, how the sides have switched.
Right. Well, you know, everybody goes through phases in life.
Yeah.
Everybody grows up and matures, or at least they're supposed to.
Yeah.
That's the goal, anyway.
And then, you know, what's interesting about W.A.S.P is, see, to me, Blackie, I kind of agree. Blackie Lawless has always kind of been. He's the face, the voice that we all think of when we think of W.A.S.P. He's been the one main guy since, you know, day one. So it literally has become his baby. But if you see how theatrical they once were, their live show, what it used to be, and he's really kind of went from being one of those bands that put on a theatrical show to kind of concentrating more on kind of, you know, his songwriting. And he's really known for he really is a gifted songwriter. And that's kind of... I think what initially propelled, you know, W.A.S.P. It's kind of interesting where these days, a lot of people, like you're saying, this was probably maybe when W.A.S.P. was at the peak, when the Headless Children came out. And ever since then, they occasionally they'll come to the U.S. and they'll do a few club shows, but they primarily, if they ever tour these days, they're huge in, like, Europe. And so he tours there most of the time now.
I noticed that, like you said, just select few dates in the States, and that's all they do anymore.
And it's kind of interesting because they make, from what I understand, they make huge bank, even though they hardly play the U.S. where the band is from. They make huge bank playing these, like, European festivals, you know. They only have to do I mean, like, another band, Mr. Big, they were huge, and they were like the Beatles in Japan. And that's where they're the most famous. And Mr. Big, from time to time, they'll pop up in Japan. They can do like 4 or 5 nights in Japan for, you know, during the year, and they just make bank. It's amazing. A lot more than they.
Yeah, you know, it's just supply and demand. I mean, you know, it's like any other business. If there's a demand for it and people are hungry for it, then, you know, you can make your money on it, you know. And unfortunately here in the States, you know, it just seems like that everything's so fast paced and changing all the time, and everybody's so worried about the flavor of the month that so many talented bands and musicians and artists just get swept away, you know, and it's just it's just a changing world, I guess, you know.
And it's kind of sad that W.A.S.P has kind of fallen into that. See, again, he's able to make a decent living. I mean, he never really has to tour again. He kind of does it because he enjoys it, I guess, obviously, and it's a way to make money. But if he just wanted to live off his songwriting royalties, like, since he's the one guy that wrote most of the stuff, hey, he can do that, you know.
Sure, probably.
Yeah. And you know, another thing that's kind of interesting I want to get your take on is, you know, like those first 3 albums, Blackie Lawless was obviously the principal songwriter, the singer, and the bass player. But when it came to doing the 3rd album, Inside the Electric Circus, he decided, you know what, I'm going to put down the bass. I'm going to be the rhythm guitar player and the lead singer. And then some of the albums later, he'd play the bass, the guitar on the record, and the lead singing. But like for Inside Electric Circus, and then I think the Headless Children, they had the guy from Carmine Appice's King Cobra band, Johnny Rod. He came in, was playing the bass for those 2 albums.
Sure, yeah. You know, again, it takes a very special, talented person to be able to do that. And there's very few, in my opinion, that actually really pull it off live.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult. Either singing gets compromised or your playing gets compromised. Usually it does.
Yeah.
And no, Blackie's great at it. Dave Mustaine also is another one it blows my mind. You watch that guy, watch what he's playing, what he's singing. It's like, how is he doing all that?
Yeah, and you know, it's amazing. Dave Mustaine, he's another interesting cat because for years he was so pissed that the guys in Metallica, you know, fired him, and he's like, you know, Metallica's going to be, you know, Megadeth's like my revenge. We're going to become bigger and better than Metallica, and they eventually did. But you know, initially when he formed Megadeth, he like, I'm just going to be the guitar player in the band. I'm going to get somebody to sing, and then he finally realized that he was writing all the stuff, and he's like, you know what? They were auditioning singers. He's like, I can't get anybody to sing my stuff that I'm writing the way I want to do it. And he kind of accidentally, somebody suggests, why don't you just see if you can sing, Dave? And he did, and they were telling him, you know, you're a pretty decent singer. And he's like, I had no idea I could sing until I formed Megadeth.
Right.
Yeah.
Necessity is the mother of invention, they say, right?
Yeah, and you know, and I think Megadeth is just, I mean, come on, they're considered one of the big 4 bands. I mean, so that right there says, you know, how much of a mark he's made with Megadeth.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, going back to your original point, it's very difficult. It's very challenging to sing and play at the same time.
Oh yeah.
In the studio, it's easy.
You know? Yeah.
Now you can play.
Yeah.
Overdub vocals.
Yeah.
So, I think musicians sometimes go overboard a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
And it's great because they can put that polished, amazing sounding album out, but it's a lot more challenging and difficult to pull that off live. And like I said, there's really honestly a very select performers and musicians that really pull that off and do a great job of it. Because like I said, usually their machine is compromised or their playing gets compromised.
Yeah, and I got to just say here, while we're talking about the main topic tonight is the Headless Children album, I just got to kind of mention in here, because one of the former W.A.S.P guitar players, he just passed away on May 29th, Bob Kulick. He never actually been a part of a touring band, but he played on like the Crimson Idol and the Still Not Black Enough album, and he was, I think, he was just perfect guy to kind of come in and do those albums after Chris, you know, Holmes left the band.
Right. Yeah, that's a shame to hear he passed away.
Yeah, that was one guy that never really got the credit due.
But I
But I guess Blackie was really really tight with him, and even when he put out a statement after Bob passed away a couple of weeks ago, and so I thought that was nice. But see, again, that's kind of interesting that we're talking about W.A.S.P. When you want to talk about this album, I thought, yeah, that'd be a great band to kind of talk about, because that was like, this album was when they were really at their peak and the most popular. And again, like, the sad thing is W.A.S.P. is still around. They still, from time to time, will put out a new studio album, which I think is kind of cool, because a lot of bands from that era, they're not releasing any new music, and so I dig them for doing that. But a lot of people really forgot about the band. A lot of people don't even know that they're even still in existence.
Yeah. Like I said, it's a shame that so many of those bands that got kind of swept away with the changing of the tide, if you will. You know. Yeah. But to me, I'm fortunate enough. I grew up in some of those times, and it had a huge impact on me. It's one of my favorite records for sure. Yeah. Like you said, it's kind of one of those albums that don't really fit any genre. I wouldn't say. It's hard to call it a rock album, and it's hard to call it just a metal album. It's just a good, passionate, powerful record. I mean, from start to finish, you just got to put it on and give it a listen.
And like people say, like Dave Mustaine that we were talking about, like when they started doing stuff on MTV, like getting political and talking about Rock the Vote, he was one of the first guys to really get heavily involved with letting people know what he thought politically. But so even before that, Blackie puts out this album, and it's really, like I said, a lot of the lyrics he focused on what was going on politically in the world, and kind of historical events. And again, just kind of, you may find this interesting, Joe. I don't know if you're aware of this. I wasn't aware of this till I started doing research for the interview tonight, and I was reading if you go on the Wikipedia, if you look on the album cover for the Headless Children, obviously it's got that kind of skull thing, and that's kind of the main thing I noticed, and I wasn't really paying attention until I was reading this on the Wikipedia today, and then I went and I was looking at like a picture of the album cover, and there's all these little kind of figures inside the skull, and if you look close enough, it's like it lists some of these historical figures that are on the album cover, and it's got a picture like of Joseph Stalin, guys like Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, Charles Manson, members of the KKK. Okay, and these are, I guess, obviously not too many favorable characters throughout history, but see, it's like they put that on the album cover, and I gotta say, until reading this today, I never was even aware of it. Like, I look at the album cover and I focus on the skull, but then if you look close enough, you'll see these little figureheads, and it's kind of interesting. And I'd be interested to find out like how many fans actually picked up on that or even aware of that.
Right, exactly. And there's a nice little breakdown and story if you buy the CD, or I'm not sure if it's on the vinyl or not, but if you read the liner notes, there are some pretty interesting
story. Yeah. Hello? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, but you're saying it's pretty interesting story. So yeah, you're right. And on that album also, by that time, the original drummer Steve Riley was out of a band who went on to join LA Guns, which he's been running all these years. And then now they have 2 LA Guns. But by the time they went in to do the Headless Children, Blackie had got Frankie Banali, who had just left Quiet Riot at the time, and that was the first album that he played on with the band.
Right. You know it's going to be a good record when the beginning of the liner notes say, it was September 1987 and I was ready to kill everybody. Yeah. But yeah, I really enjoyed talking with you, Joe, about this because, again, it brought back a lot of memories because W.A.S.P. was one of my favorite bands, and I think too many people have forgotten about just what a great band they were. Oh, yeah. I'm not one of the people that forgot, that's for sure.
Yeah. And the thing about it, too, is I was reading that, like you're saying, it's really one of those albums that's really hard to classify because it's partly a concept album, partially based on political things and stuff that was going on at the time, but I don't know that I would really call it a rock album even. It was done by a great rock band, but they said this is one album by W.A.S.P. that was really the most critically acclaimed just because of the songwriting, and they were so impressed that he was able to write more than just typical rock song.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal record. Highly recommend it. If anybody hasn't listened to it, definitely pick it up and check it out. Great record.
Yeah, and then another interesting thing is this would be as great of an album as this was. This is when I said the band kind of fell apart and went their separate ways, and he got new replacement members, but eventually to come in and take over the original guys. But this would be Chris Holmes' last album with W.A.S.P. for a 10-year period, and then he would return, I think in 1997, and his first new album with W.A.S.P. at the time was that KFD album.
Right.
Yeah, Kill F and Die. That's what we're supposed to. But see, even the comeback album in 1997, they put out this. Just the title is controversial. KFD, what is that? Kill F, Kill F and Die.
Right.
And that was a much more aggressive sounding album. I guess they're coming back. Okay, we want to prove to everybody we're a metal band, or at the time, because that was what was popular at the time.
Right.
And
well, W.A.S.P. always had that kind of edginess and rawness to what they did, and that was one of the things that kind of drew me to them, especially even with Blackie's voice, it's just it's very unique and just very tortured sounding, and it's great. I love it.
See, and when people think of the band W.A.S.P., they think of, okay, first of all, I mean, the one thing I always heard, I don't know if this is true, that W.A.S.P. has those little periods after each letter. So somebody is initially going around starting the rumor, W.A.S.P. stood for "We Are Sexual Perverts." I don't know if that's actually true or not.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
But what a great marketing thing if it was, if it wasn't really true. Kind of like I heard Geezer Butler in an interview talking about when Black Sabbath first started. He says everybody saying we were devil worshippers, and then so we just started wearing dark clothes. We started wearing crosses around our neck, messing with people, lines. Oh wait, are they devil worshippers? Are they Christians? And he says people just didn't know, And then you had the PMRC, like you said, which was maybe the best thing that ever happened to them. Start stickering all their.
Yeah, they were throwing gas on the fire, literally.
And this is pre-internet, and so they had Circus Magazine, Metal Edge, all those great rock magazine, Hit Parader, and they were writing about how the PMRC wanted to, they had their I think their filthy 15 list of all these 15 bands they wanted to stop, and you'd laugh if you looked at some of the bands that were on that list, but they were writing about these bands in the rock press. They were getting all kind of recognition on the radio, and a band like W.A.S.P. was interesting because it had hit songs like "Forever Free" and "The Real Me," and even "Blind in Texas." They played brief, for a little bit on MTV even. So they did have their hits, but they were getting all this notoriety, and they're being known for their image, their theatrics, throwing meat out into the crowd, a lot more than just for their music.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. They marketed themselves, and they had a gimmick, and they ran with it, and it made they made a good run of it, what they did, and created a legacy they really have,
Yeah, and I don't know if this was Blackie's intention, but another interesting thing is, like I said, by the second W.A.S.P. album, he's the only one on the cover of the album, and I think part of the reason is, let's be honest, when we hear the name W.A.S.P., one of the first images that come to your mind is it's almost like Blackie Lawless is W.A.S.P. He almost became, if you look at that album cover on the Last Command, it's almost like he's the band's mascot. And the very much similar thing happened with Angus Young from AC/DC, Dee Snider from Twisted Sister.
Sure, yeah.
And when you think of these iconic bands, you think of that one band member, and it's kind of, I think with Blackie and W.A.S.P. it just kind of accidentally happened, but then Blackie ran with it,
Right.
Yeah, and he's a very, from what I've heard, he's a very not only is he just a great songwriter and performer, but I've heard he's very educated. Like when he wrote the Headless Children, he was studying all these historical figures. He wanted to write about it.
Right.
And I heard he's a huge baseball fan. I guess that's what he does kind of on the side outside of music. He'll go to baseball games and study the history of baseball. Yeah.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know that about him.
Yeah, but
cool.
Yeah, cool. But yeah, so this is and a lot of people they will point to this album, like even the critics, and say that was W.A.S.P. really at their high point, and I think most people, even that weren't W.A.S.P fans, because they saw those videos and they saw those songs being either played on MTV or the radio. They're like, I saw that video for Forever Free, and I went out and bought that one. And they're not even necessarily a W.A.S.P fan, but because they heard it on the radio back then.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how they got introduced to it.
Yeah. Because a lot of those bands, like a band like W.A.S.P, you never would imagine being played on the radio, but that was kind of their crossover hit.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, is there any other thing you want to kind of bring up about the album that you can think of before we wrap this up?
I think we covered it. There's just a lot of great tunes on it, and it's a phenomenal album that people should give it a second listen, a third listen, and if you've never listened to it, definitely go check it out. Look it up online, and get introduced to an amazing record, man, and band.
Oh, the only obvious thing I forgot to bring up before now, which I will, is we're talking about marketing, for the band and kind of their image at the time. I think one thing that kind of is a shame is Chris Holmes, I think, is he's an underrated guitar player. I never think he got the huge, you would never see Chris Holmes on the cover, even today, of Guitar World magazine. He just has not got that respect or that recognition. But part of the reason is, if you look back at that movie, The Decline of Western Civilization, that one scene he had in the pool where he's as drunk as hell, that really ruined his image. Even when people bring up Chris Holmes today, that's what they talk about, that part in the movie. And I think that had a huge role with him being let go from the band, and that, unfortunately, I think people started...
Again, like I said, I don't know the inner workings of those bands and stuff like that, but I heard those rumors too that he did have some pretty serious alcohol problems.
Yeah. Well, he even admits, I've heard him in an interview a few years ago, was saying, at that time I was really messed up. I was really, I can admit I was drunk and I was really messed up. And he's like, so I don't even know what I was thinking. He goes, and he says, it's very interesting that the director must have known what they had with that scene, because that out of that, you take all the clips from the different bands in that movie, that's the one clip everybody talks about. That's the one clip everybody...
Oh, yeah, that one's stuck in everybody's mind. As soon as you brought up The Decline of the Western Civilization, that's immediately what come to my mind, is him in the pool.
Yeah. And see, people's got that, and he's released, I really haven't heard any of it. I've seen a few clips on the internet the last few years. He put out a couple of solo albums, and it doesn't really have too much to sound like anything like W.A.S.P did. I guess he's trying to get his music out there, and that's cool. But I see, that's another thing. See, not too many people, I guess, want to get involved with putting out an album, because they have that image of him, unfortunately. But I respect the guy for still giving a shot and going. I guess he lives these days in France or Europe, and he's putting his music out there. You get it on the internet, but gotta love the guy for still.
Oh yeah. He was an integral part of defining W.A.S.P. As we know it. I love it.
And then the last thing I'll say on the subject is they had the original drummer Tony Richards. He played on the very first W.A.S.P album, but then he did another character that after that first W.A.S.P album, he kind of disappeared, and people forgot that he was even in the band.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Joe, I want to thank you once again for taking time talking to me. It's been a lot of fun. If you could just hold on for a minute, and I'll be right back with you.